Are you letting them in, Kathleen?
Oh, yeah, Chris let them in. We've got 6 people in.
Oh, Chris, oh, how come I can't see him?
7.
Oh, because we got the split thing. My apologies.
Yeah, so we got the
Okay,
panel.
sorry, I forgot we're doing the split presenter. Hi, all. Welcome to the meeting. Let's see. Looks like there's people joining, so if there's still folks rolling in, we'll give it a minute.
Yeah, it looks like folks are trickling in.
I'll give it one more minute here and then we'll get started with the preliminaries. Okay. James, you want to start projecting?
Can do.
Okay, welcome to the Stinson Beach Adaptation and Resilience Collaboration Adaptation Study webinar. Okay, and Kathleen just put in the chat that the materials that are going to be presented tonight will be available on the website after the meeting, so you can refer to them. So if you are inclined to take notes, know that you'll see the slides and you can be advised with whatever you want to take notes on. All right, next slide. All right, so we have a presentation outline here. Basically, it's our pretty straightforward agenda tonight. We'll have a welcome and introduction, presentation that has subcomponents of an overview of the adaptation study report. That's the main reason for this meeting tonight, to give an overview, to highlight some key findings, and to define the next steps. So it really is just a rollout, highlight, let you know that this report is going to be available starting tomorrow on the ARC website. So you'll be able to review it at that time. If you're on the distribution list for this process, you'll receive a notice that it's available. Then after we hear from James, who's the engineer, who's going to talk to us tonight about all the technical stuff and the overview, we'll have a Q&A. He can answer questions, or anyone on the team can answer any questions, and then we'll adjourn. We've scheduled ourselves until 8 o'clock. We think the presentation will take around 40 minutes or so. We're going to keep you muted until the presentation is done. And then we ask that you use, go to the next slide. I think we have the graphic on that. Oh, sorry, workshop objectives: to provide an overview of the whole process, the ARC initiative and process, present the findings from a recently released report. It's not recently released, it's actually going to come out tomorrow, as I said. Released report on sea level rise adaptation pathway planning, specifically for Stinson Beach. Present the next steps in the planning process, and provide an opportunity for Q&A. Next slide. Participation guidelines: we ask that ask questions after the presentation during the Q&A. Like I said, we'll keep you muted. I'll prompt you, and we'd like you to use the hand thing. And I think we have a graphic on the next one. We'll show you. If you're not familiar with Zoom, we'll orient you on that. It's a raising of the hand icon. Those go in order that people press them, so I will prompt according to that list. And then we'll unmute you when I call on you. And please be patient if there are any technical difficulties. We're all used to virtual meetings these days. We have a technical person online. If anything happens, she's awesome and hopefully can fix things for us. We're encouraging you to ask questions tonight because we've got James here and we've got Kathleen and her team here to answer questions. If you have comments that you want the Board of Supervisors to see before they contemplate the report in the August meeting, Board of Supervisors August meeting, we encourage you to write to that email address right there. So we're not going to be keeping detailed notes tonight or taking things that are in the chat, but rather write any substantive comments to that email, and that will all be put in a package and put in front of the Board of Supervisors before the August meeting, which is August 16th. Also, if you want to put, if you're shy and you want to put a question in the chat, if we have a lull and we don't have that many people on the call here tonight, if there's no one with a hand up, then we will go to the written questions in the chat, but we can't guarantee if more people show up that we'll get to those. Okay, so that's sort of process for the meeting. Next slide. And here, if you're not familiar with Zoom, depending on what kind of computer and how you're configured, someplace there will be a raise hand icon that's circled there. You want to look for that. And then it shows you what some of the other icons mean. You have a mute in the lower left. I don't believe we're putting people on camera tonight. It will just be, you get prompted. And then if you want to know who else is in the room, there's the participants. You click on that, it'll show you a list of the participants. Then the chat function, if you want to write that question, that's right there. And then closed captioning. If you want to have closed captioning, you can go under the 3 dots where it says more and opt for that option. So just a quick orientation on that. Okay, and then introductions. So I've referenced a couple of people here, but let's have the team go around and introduce themselves. I'll start, obviously, I'm Marie Rainwater, facilitator. I do facilitation, mediation, public engagement, and process design. Been doing it for a million years, and I'm supporting here for process. So Kathleen, I'll turn to you and your team.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Kilgariff. I'm a senior planner with the Community Development Agency, and I work with the Long Range Planning team.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Chu. I'm the Assistant Director for Community Development.
Carissa, you there?
Oh, sorry, I don't usually introduce myself. Hi, I'm Carissa Dorothy. I'm part of the CDA Media team working with Long Range Planning. I'm here if you have any technical difficulties. Thank you.
And James.
And I'm James Jackson. I'm a civil and coastal engineer with Environmental Science Associates. I've been supporting the county on sea level rise planning for almost 10 years now, from more countywide assessments and now focused in on Stinson Beach. So I'm really glad to be here and give you all an overview of our study.
Okay, next slide.
With that, I'll take it away and provide a project overview of the Stinson ARC project. I will summarize the vulnerability and risk assessment and then go through an overview of the adaptation pathway analysis process, including a short video by one of our teammates, Virtual Planet Technologies, and then we'll round things up with next steps. So first of all, why is the Stinson Beach ARC needed? Stinson Beach experiences hazards and impacts today under existing sea level. These images on the right-hand side show some examples of shoreline erosion, beach erosion, and structural damages that have occurred as most recently as the January 2023 storms. The middle photo shows Calle del Arroyo, which provides access to a majority of the low-lying community, and that's just showing a typical king tide condition, which occurs about once or so a year under existing sea level. And so without action, sea level rise projections and hazard modeling show that these impacts will worsen. So we're here to understand the full extent of those impacts and develop a plan. So the purpose of this study is, first and foremost, to protect the community development, the habitats, and recreational opportunities throughout Stinson Beach. Another initial purpose for the study was to refine and update a prior sea level rise vulnerability assessment that was conducted for the entire Pacific coast of the county. So we're focusing in more detail here at Stinson Beach. We are piloting an adaptation pathway planning approach for the community here, and importantly, identifying next steps for developing and implementing community adaptation projects. So the technical process that we followed here is a standard practice for sea level rise planning and engineering analysis. And so that starts with first reviewing the science. What are the projections in sea level rise, and et cetera, that we can expect and should plan for. We then identified all of the assets and resources in the community. In other words, all of the development, homes, recreational facilities, and other recreational and habitat resources, including the beach and dunes and wetlands. And we then also map various hazards so that we could take those two data sources to assess vulnerability and risk in the community with regards to sea level rise. Moving from the vulnerability assessment, we then identified, screened, and evaluated a range of potential adaptation measures that could be used to address these vulnerabilities, and then collectively brought together a set of tools or a set of measures that comprise an adaptation pathway. And so we developed and evaluated an adaptation pathway for the community, and in that process understood more detail on what the next steps should be. And those, in summary, are to organize, develop funding, and coordinate and plan adaptation projects. We identify priority adaptation measures that should be sought, that should be explored early on and immediately, and also lay out a monitoring approach for sea level rise, tracking, observing physical changes in the community, and also tracking the performance of adaptation measures. The project process has included a range of stakeholders. This graphic here shows the broad range of various stakeholders here, from local residents to local land and critical infrastructure managers. We've got regulatory agencies, visitors, businesses, and other local groups. And so throughout this project, we've engaged with this wide range of stakeholders, and the adaptation pathway reflects this diverse stakeholder membership. Another important bit of context for our project here is that we're not the only ones thinking about sea level rise for Stinson Beach. There are a number of other local sea level rise projects going on in the general vicinity of Stinson. That includes the Bolinas Y Wetlands project by the Greater Fairlawns Association up at the north end of Bolinas Lagoon, Shoreline Highway Adaptation Study by Caltrans for Highway 1 that runs along the inland side of Bolinas Lagoon, our project, the Stinson Beach Arc. We've also got the South End Living Shoreline project by the Greater Fairlawns Association that covers the Bolinas Lagoon side and habitat enhancements along the community interface with Bolinas Lagoon. The Stinson Beach Flood Study and parking lot rehab projects by National Park Service, which affect the creek flooding as well as the community's recreational resources at the National Park Stinson Beach, as well as the Community Wastewater Treatment Study by the Water District, looking at the feasibility of a community system that's underway, and also some dune evolution research being conducted on North Central Coast dunes by Greater Fairlawns and NOAA researchers, and that includes dunes at Stinson Beach. I'm now going to give a quick overview of our sea level rise vulnerability and economic risk assessments for the project. Our updated vulnerability assessment included updated sea level rise scenarios. We included additional asset information for the community. And for each sea level rise scenario, we looked at both typical monthly high tide conditions and their progression with sea level rise, as well as potential 100-year storm impacts. And that includes coastal storm wave runup along the beach, storm surge in Bolinas Lagoon, and creek flooding from East Scoop Creek. We also did update some coastal erosion projections along the beach And there was also the introduction of the Cosmos groundwater hazard mapping that we incorporated into this vulnerability assessment. We did the vulnerability assessment and finished that right before the state of California came out with its most recent guidance update on sea level rise planning. And so that was at actually a pretty good time so that we could move into the adaptation pathway planning task of the project and come up with our strategies and timing associated with this new guidance. And so the vulnerability assessment looked up to 6.6 feet of sea level rise, which was previously forecasted at about 2,100. And with the new guidance, the end of century sea level rise scenario is about 3.3 or so feet. And so with the adaptation pathway, we evaluated the intermediate high projection, which is the more quickly sloping line here on this graph, and the earlier timeframes for the sea level rise amounts shown, looking at 0.8 feet, 1.6 feet, and 3.3 feet of sea level rise. And for context here, all of these projections are made in relation to the baseline of 2000. And based on the San Francisco tide gauge, the sea level has risen about 0.2 feet over the last 25 years. This chart here summarizes the vulnerability of the community to coastal hazards under existing conditions or today, and with just 1.6 feet of sea level rise. And the gist of this is that there are many homes and properties at risk of flooding from either the beach side of the community or the creek flooding. The beaches are highly dynamic. The shoreline is relatively stable, but beaches today are, potentially eroded completely during extreme storms, such as El Nino years or that January 2023 event. And other important vulnerabilities to point out include marsh habitats. Those are existing just along the perimeter of the community in the Stinson area that could be squeezed and drowned out by sea level rise. And there's Shoreline Highway, which is also exposed to storm surge, as well as creek flooding in a couple of locations. And the community relies on septic systems, on-site wastewater treatment systems, which are, many are already threatened today. And I think the figure is about 10 or 20 systems are needed to be upgraded or converted each year, dealing with the already high groundwater levels. So there are many pressing issues that are facing Stinson today, and sea level rise will only make these problems worse. So it's time to plan. This is a high-level summary of the economic risk assessment that we did and matching up with our vulnerability assessment. And just at 3.3 feet of sea level rise, which could occur anywhere from 2085 to 2100, the community could experience total damages to homes and property totaling about $1.3 billion with a 100-year storm event occurring at 3.3 feet of sea level rise. Beach erosion at the same sea level rise scenario of 3.3 feet could lead to a significant reduction of beach widths, limiting access to visitors during the peak season, and a potential recreational loss of 670,000 per year at that 3.3 feet of sea level rise. So now we're going to move into the adaptation pathway for Stinson Beach. And first of all, what is an adaptation pathway? The adaptation pathway is a framework for decision-making that calls for a series of actions to be taken incrementally over time in response to changing conditions. So this framework is by definition a flexible and incremental approach to planning, and in this context for sea level rise adaptation. And so that certain measures that are needed most immediately can be taken, and the community can monitor and adapt to changes as they occur and actuate additional measures as needed. So this helps to prevent overinvestment in an uncertain future and allows more flexibility moving through time and with sea level rise. So the key objectives of our adaptation pathway here for Stinson Beach are as follows: to protect the environment and public health, to protect development against sea level rise and potential hazards associated with sea level rise. We are trying to do this collaboratively, so we're connecting our pathway and bringing in elements from other ongoing planning projects in the area, like the examples that I mentioned before, to enhance habitats and promote natural processes to the extent possible, so that we can maintain recreational and other shoreline uses. And last but not least, to plan and adapt equitably into the future here at Stinson Beach. So the technical framework for coming up with an adaptation pathway is to first define what are the options here. You know, we started with our vulnerability. We know what are the potential issues. And so we need to identify all the potential adaptation measures that could be used to address these hazards. We then evaluated the trade-offs using a standard set of criteria so that we could understand the relative pluses and minuses of comparable adaptation measures. We established the timeframes when these measures are needed. So say you need to implement a certain measure before the flood elevation rises by a certain amount. You need to make sure those projects are studied, designed, and constructed before the threshold is actually met. And so that brings in the concept of lead times and action triggers to initiate that process so that an adaptation measure can be implemented when it is needed. From those pieces of information, the options, how they compare and trade off against each other with respect to standard criteria, and when those different options are needed, we are able to compile and evaluate an example adaptation pathway. So we compiled from this range of measures to create a pathway for Stinson Beach, and importantly, outlining a monitoring approach so that the community can best understand how the physical conditions are changing, as well as the forecasts or how the sea level rise projections might change with time, so we can best understand how much time we have and actuate different planning and design processes when needed. Our adaptation pathway for Stinson Beach builds upon a number of past and current adaptation strategies or measures at Stinson Beach. And those include a range of solutions to dealing with coastal hazards, including structural adaptation, like elevating homes, coastal armoring, such as seawalls and rock revetments, other flood management features, such as the bulkheads in Seadrift and Bolinas Lagoon. As I mentioned earlier, everyone's on on-site wastewater treatment systems that need to be regularly maintained and modified in response to rising groundwater. There have been a few instances of structure removal or removing of damaged homes after extreme storm events for unrepairable homes, and then ongoing maintenance of roads and other utilities, such as the recent Seadrift Road maintenance project to address drainage issues related to high groundwater. So we're building upon the existing conditions here and looking at these existing measures as we develop our adaptation pathway. And so we developed a kind of an inventory or a library of potential adaptation measures for Stinson Beach. They're summarized here on this slide. We're pulling from a range of categories, including natural and nature-based measures like cobble gravel berms, vegetated dunes, as well as traditional structural measures such as elevating structures and maintaining and modifying existing bulkheads. And so here on the right-hand side, we have the evaluation criteria that we ran these different measures through, and that included engineering, environmental, regulatory, social, and economic criteria. And we document all of the potential measures, provide a relative trade-offs matrix and other information in our Appendix B to the study report, which will be released tomorrow. So the Appendix B sort of serves as your menu of options including a lot of information of where these measures could be used, when they might be needed, what hazards they address, and so on and so forth, comparing the various evaluation criteria. So how did we then compile the adaptation pathway? We looked at our vulnerability assessment, identified what those hazard exposures are, both where the exposures occur, the type of hazard, and that again looks at both extreme impacts from potential storm flooding from the lagoon, creek, or ocean waves, as well as long-term chronic issues such as erosion of the shoreline and beach reduction and dune reduction, rising high tides, standard typical monthly high tides, and the progression of those with sea level rise, as well as rising groundwater and shallow and emerging groundwater. And so with our adaptation pathway, we applied measures over time with sea level rise to respond to these hazards. And we did it in a way to minimize the aquatic impacts and also to consider those other plans, like I mentioned. So for example, Caltrans is working on shoreline highway adaptation. And so we're looking at elevating the roads just within Stinson Beach, respecting the Caltrans process for shoreline highway. I now have a short video to show everyone here that covers a high-level review of vulnerability, as well as a summary of our adaptation pathway for the community.
Stinson Beach is a vibrant coastal community where land and sea meet in a dynamic and ever-changing environment. A cherished destination for locals and visitors alike, it offers stunning natural beauty, endless recreation, and a strong sense of community. But this treasured shoreline faces growing challenges. Coastal storms, erosion, and rising groundwater, all intensified by sea level rise, are threatening homes, infrastructure, and the beach itself. To help the community prepare, Marin County has developed an adaptation pathway framework, a phased, flexible roadmap that outlines strategies to respond to rising water levels over time. By carefully balancing community resilience, economic feasibility, and environmental protection, this framework provides the information, context, and tools to help find a path forward. This approach considers key thresholds, like increasing water levels and shrinking beach widths, so that actions can be taken incrementally when they are needed most. While the exact timing and rate of sea level rise may be uncertain, the trend is clear. Sea levels are rising, and planning ahead is essential. In the 3D model below, you can see the creek and lagoon, the beach houses, as well as Highway 1 and the Calle del Arroyo access road. Let's take a look at how sea level rise and storms could impact Stinson. Today, extreme coastal storms bring powerful waves, storm surge, and precipitation that can erode the beach, inundate streets and properties, damage homes and infrastructure, and impact wastewater treatment systems throughout the low-lying community. With just 0.8 feet of sea level rise, the impacts of a similar storm could cause extreme damage to the community. Wave run-up and storm surge extend further inland. Rising waters accelerate shoreline and dune erosion and exacerbate existing groundwater issues in the community. Stinson's 2022 vulnerability assessment found that several hundred properties could face flooding in the coming decades. Even now, 100-year storms bring intense waves, flooding some roads and homes and surrounding others. Without action, a similar storm with 0.8 feet of sea level rise could cause extreme damage to the community. Storm surges will flood most streets and nearby areas that previously stayed dry. Combined with king tides, the highest tides of the year, flooding damage extends further inland. Rising waters accelerate shoreline erosion, shrinking the beach, and further exposing the community to storm impacts and increasing its vulnerability to future storms. Stinson Beach has experienced wave runup and flooding before, leading to dune erosion and damage to homes and infrastructure. Over the decades, this has resulted in efforts like the construction of the Seadrift rock revetment, shoreline armoring, elevating homes, and even the removal of homes damaged beyond repair. One key component of this approach is to implement protective measures, like living shorelines along the beach in the form of dunes and cobble berms. These nature-based solutions can help buffer the community from powerful wave energy and reduce erosion in a way that reduces long-term impacts to beach ecology and recreation compared to traditional armoring approaches, though these features will require periodic maintenance. This includes elevating homes and roads to reduce flood risks. Upgrading septic systems and utilities is also essential to address rising groundwater and maintain local water quality and community functionality. Even today, several homes need to be elevated to be protected from an extreme storm. Here you can see how different sea level rise scenarios would impact the community. Houses highlighted on the map will need to be retrofitted or elevated as water levels rise to 0.8 feet, 1.6 feet, 2.5 feet, and 3.3 feet. Key roads like Calle del Arroyo and portions of Highway 1 will also need to be elevated to maintain safe access and connectivity. The Stinson Beach County Water District is also planning to transition wastewater treatment to a community treatment system in the coming decades. Until then, homeowners must maintain and upgrade or convert their septic systems as groundwater levels rise. Bolinas Lagoon is a vital wetland and bird sanctuary that supports rich biodiversity, but rising sea levels threaten its delicate ecosystem. Currently, extreme storms already flood the entire lagoon and a few access roads. However, with as little as 0.8 feet of sea level rise, Seadrift Road, Calle del Arroyo, and even parts of Highway 1 could be flooded during storm surge and creek flooding events. This is a view from the west part of the Seadrift community. The adaptation pathway in this area includes elevating existing bulkheads, as well as homes and roads. The highlighted houses indicate which ones will require elevation as water levels rise to 0.8, 1.6, 2.5, and 3.3 feet. But there is hope. Dunes and cobble berms can protect the shoreline and buffer against wave energy while fostering resilience of beach habitats. Other adaptation measures can accommodate rising water by elevating homes, utilities, and key roads. Community members can work together to ensure flexible and long-term strategies are in place. Stinson Beach's future depends on a collaborative effort between local residents, Marin County, and key partners including Caltrans, National Park Service, and Stinson Beach County Water District. Together, we can build a resilient community in the face of these challenges. Join us in shaping Stinson Beach's future. Learn more about the Adaptation Pathways approach, share your ideas, and get involved in this important effort. For more information, visit our Preparing for Sea Level Rise Together website. Let's ensure a safe, sustainable future for this cherished community. Thank you for watching the Sea Level Rise Explorer, Stinson Beach.
Right. So with that, let's move on into some high-level takeaways from our adaptation pathway analysis. Now, all of this is documented in great detail in our study, which will be available tomorrow morning. And so I just want to run through a few high-level takeaways here. And as you mentioned in the video, there are a number of priority adaptation projects that could be explored in the community. And this table here summarizes a few measures, potential leads, and timeframes. And so as soon as possible, planning should commence for the elevation of roadways and bridges in the community, as well as continuation of how the county has already developed a feasibility study for living shorelines on the beach side of the community, looking at dunes and cobble berms. And then over time, in the next decade or so, Various structures might need to be retrofitted and or elevated to accommodate rising floodwaters. The water district is already underway with the feasibility study on community wastewater treatment. And, not as pressing, but in the next decade or so, looking at some of the existing infrastructure in sea drift and its resilience to rising seas and increased storm flooding. And so in the, in our report, we go into more detail on, potential leads and a lot more considerations for each of these individual measures, where specifically they occur and the relative timing. And so to put together a full adaptation pathway that gets everything in the community resilient to a 100-year storm with sea level rise, all the way up to 3.3 feet of sea level rise, where adaptation costs might total about $1.2 billion. So high cost here, but that's still less than the potential damages associated with that same sea level rise and storm amount. And these are costs in $25, including a wide range of measures that are included in the pathway other than wastewater treatment system damages or costs, just because the high difficulty in quantifying both damages and costs based on basically a lot of unknown information for individual systems. So in total, there's a high cost to this adaptation pathway in the community, but there are a number of funding options available. These links here are to several resources that compile different funding as it's available online, including the Bay Area Climate Adaptation Network, the Coastal Quest funding database, and funding for climate action. And so we describe these and others in more detail in our report, as well as describe and evaluate a number of new local revenue mechanisms that could be explored and used to raise funds for adaptation, including special assessment districts, such as the existing sea drift associations, special assessment districts to maintain bulkheads and roadways in the community. Climate resilience districts are starting to be used, but in other areas, which could be applied for some adaptation projects at Stinson. And then geologic hazard abatement districts are also a relevant tool, which have been used more broadly in California, but could also be used to support sea level rise projects in Stinson Beach. A really important component of the adaptation pathway framework is a monitoring approach, understanding where things are, where things are headed, and being able to plan accordingly. And so a monitoring approach in the community would consist of new efforts to track shoreline changes, beach and dune width, storm surge and wave events as they occur. And so documenting and tracking these local environmental conditions help us to identify specific thresholds when actions need to be taken. Like I mentioned earlier, observing not just the events that as they occur, but also understanding the best available science and projections for sea level rise is very important to understanding lead times and planning for different levels of risk. It would be important to document coastal hazard impacts as they occur. So, flooding impacts and damages, increased frequency of flooding could be tracked and documented over time, as well as documenting the performance of any adaptation measures. And all of this effort could be coordinated with others. There are a number of monitoring efforts underway today in Stinson Beach, and that includes wastewater treatment system inspections by the water district, water quality sampling. In the National Park Service does periodic beach width surveys along their shoreline, and other efforts to track sea level rise and evolution of beaches and dunes. This example graphic here shows the sea level rise trends that are plotted for the San Francisco tide gauge. And so this is a great resource for observing what's the current long-term trend, as well as observing, certain stormy surge events, El Nino events. You can see the trend line is shown with a red line in black, and that's kind of the average sea level rise rate. But you can see from the blue line that there are periods of time in which sea level is elevated, and that occurs during El Nino events, during storms. So this is a helpful resource to understand, what has the sea level been doing in the area. So wanted to cover a couple of adaptation next steps here for the project. Wanted to start with the project team's planning recommendations next steps. And that is to establish a local community work group to formalize the local leadership in order to organize the community, as well as to explore funding opportunities, to explore the community sea level rise monitoring approach and coordination, as well as following the county's ongoing sea level rise governance structure study and engaging with that process. And like I mentioned an earlier slide, engaging and coordinating with other ongoing sea level rise projects, such as the wastewater community system feasibility study, Highway 1 adaptation planning by Caltrans, and work by the National Park Service, just to name a few. As a part of this process, the public participation next steps are to sleep tight tonight and be ready to review that study report when it's released tomorrow. We'll have the full report and all of its appendices available on this project website, which is listed on the bottom of this slide here. And so you have some time to dig into that report, send any questions or comments to the county. The email provided here, stinsonarc@marincounty.gov. And please do so by August 15th. So the project team can compile that and provide it to the County Board of Supervisors ahead of our scheduled presentation on August 19th. At this time, I am happy to take any questions verbally or through the chat. Marie is going to help field these questions, and I'll take any technical, engineering, or adaptation pathway related questions, and we've got Chris and Kathleen at the county to field any more centric questions around the process and planning. And we also have some other folks available to speak to the ongoing governance structure. If anyone's curious. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, James. Just really quickly, I want to review, because I know we had some people join us a little bit after starting the presentation. James just noted, you can just Google Marin ARC and you'll get that website. I know it was a long link to look at, but I've done that. And then also important to note the email there. What we're contemplating today is getting James to answer those technical questions and Kathleen or Chris to answer any sort of process questions. We've got not that many folks on the line. If you're super shy and want to put one in the chat, if we get through all the hands, we will consult the chat. If for some reason we don't get through all the hands and it keeps cycling, then we encourage you to raise your hand. If you have comments that you want the Board of Supervisors to see as they contemplate this report on the August 19th, please write in your comments. A package will be compiled and put in front of all the Board of Supervisors. Okay, we're not going to take detailed notes tonight. It's really just a forum to answer your questions in anticipation of the release of the report tomorrow. Also, if you join late, if you're on the distribution list, you'll get an email that says, hey, it's live, go over to the website. So you can check the website tomorrow and see the full report. So with that, I'll start prompting folks. Please just raise your hand. I'll prompt in the order. You'll be unmuted at that time. Jeff Lumens, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Marie. I noted with interest the idea of creating a local community group to go and raise funds. Derek Johnson's office quite prominently has noted recently that a sea level rise project group will be established kind of at the highest levels of his organization and county pursuant to Senate Bill 272, we have to have a sea level rise countywide plan that will include these kinds of projects. And they've noted that they want to consolidate all county sea level rise resilience projects within that office. How does that work with also creating a completely separate non-governmental local organization? I don't understand how those two would interrelate and why this wouldn't be being done under SB 272 sea level rise project planning that's currently underway.
I'm not sure, James, if you want to speak to what's in the report or if Chris or Kathleen from the county want to take that, or AECom, we have Christian here. I'm not sure who to toss that to, so.
I can start. Hi Jeff. I hear you. Yeah, I think like right now there are quite a few unknowns related to sea level rise work at the county. You've got the sea level rise governance structure work that's happening. We do have Christian Bevington with AECom on this meeting tonight to answer any of those specific questions, and I'll let him kind of touch on that more. But you're also right, there is the AB 272. And that requires the county to develop sea level rise adaptation plans for both the county's coast and bay shoreline by 2034. And so while the sea level rise structure governance work will play into that, we're also going to see like how this work that's already been done can inform that as well. We started this project before that bill was adopted, and we are now working through what that overall process is going to look like. But no matter what, we do know that sea level rise planning is most successful when it's driven by the community. And, community-led initiatives are going to be super important for long-term community resilience here. So you're totally right. There's a lot going on, but we are working to figure out what this will look like in the future. And Christian, if you have anything else to add, please do.
Sure, yeah, from the project that AECOM's working on with the county, I think it's important to say that the process that we're going through and what may be the eventual outcome is not intended to slow down any of the local efforts. It's supposed to be us figuring out how collaboration can happen at a scale that is more than, for example, just Stinson doing its own thing. We currently don't have any conclusions, and there's not a end goal that we're working towards. We've done, as you know, Jeff, you've been involved in some of the engagement that we've already conducted. We've been doing a lot of listening with community groups across the county, including across West Marin, to understand challenges, opportunities, and priorities. And we're at that pivot point where we're starting to think about what collaboration could actually look like. And obviously SB 272 feeds into that, and the local adaptation work happening on the coast also feeds into that. But I think it's important to say that we don't have any end conclusions or goals in mind. We're still very much going through the process. As Kathleen says, it will be driven by the engagement that we have and have already conducted.
Okay, anyone else on the county team that has anything they want to add?
I just add, that as Christian said, the local work is really key here. I think having adaptation, the adaptation pathway and adaptation solutions identified is one piece of the governance work. With SB 272, we are going to have to figure out kind of how to adapt the remaining coastline. So there is a bit of work to play catch up, and so we have this across the county where there are places where we've moved further ahead, but the goals of SB 272 really are to catch everyone up so that we don't leave places behind. That being said, one of the things that the governance study is looking at is how best to organize around this. Looking at the adaptation pathways presented tonight, there may be a reason for Stinson Beach to move ahead, utilizing one of the governance structures to find ways to finance and start to work on prioritizing projects. It's hard to say for sure what the best course of action will be. It's largely a community conversation, and it'll require thinking about what types of investments and what types of work make the most sense for the entire community as multiple studies move forward, as the wastewater study moves forward. it'll all start to define, I think, a little bit more what types of costs and what types of solutions are available to Stinson Beach.
Okay. Then next up is Jean Gould. You have the floor, Jean.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
you're
great.
live.
Thank you. I was really interested in the financial representations of the costs at various sea level rise scenarios. I've done some calculations of my own, and I guess it's dependent a lot upon, you know, are access roads still available to the community? Because if they're not, that has all kinds of knock-on implications. So I guess the question I would have, when you did, for example, the property valuations costs at different scenarios, were you sort of looking at the today value of those homes and losses associated with that sort of this color-coded different sea level rise scenario losses of those homes? Or I mean, if you could give some color to the calculation, because I would have expected some of it to be frankly higher.
Yeah, so we don't have anyone from our economics team on the call tonight, but we have with our report, we summarize the methods and findings, as well as include the appendices that drill into the details. But in short, we looked at existing property and improvement values and ran through the various sea level rise and storm and erosion scenarios and used methods to estimate damages based on depth of flooding, loss of properties that became fully inundated or fully eroded, but then the potential damage of contents and recovery time, lost property tax revenue from any damaged properties. And so, yeah, we tallied all of that up with 3.3 feet of sea level rise. And that is focused on property building improvements and the associated revenues generated from those properties. And I think what you're speaking to is there are a number of other pieces that could be damaged and incur costs, like septic systems, for instance, on-site septic systems. Just we didn't have enough information to really accurately define damages and impacts to those systems. And similarly, there could be other additional damages that could occur throughout the community under extreme events. And so I think the cost could be higher in considering other utilities or road infrastructure issues that might arise from sea level rise.
Thank you. That really addressed my question. I'll look forward to seeing the detail in the report.
Great. Thanks, Jean.
Okay, since there are no hands up, I think is there a question here? Oh. Jeff writes, didn't want to bring this up as a major point, but before you present to the soups, you may want to update your slide on the 8 projects. Sorry.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I see that too, Marie. Thanks, Jeff. That was just a hasty labeling mistake. So thanks for pointing that out.
Thanks for the public QA/QC. All right. So going back to the participants, do we have any hands up here? Nobody's got a hand up. I'm going to leave a few minutes in case somebody's cogitating. The awkward silence that we all have in virtual meetings now when we can't be more interactive with each other. Okay, well, I think we've done what we set out to do with our agenda tonight. Again, the report will be posted and live tomorrow. If you're on the distribution list, you'll get an email telling you that. If not, just Google Marin ARC and it'll get you to the page. And again, you can use that email if you want something, if you want a comment to be put in front of the Board of Supervisors. And great, me filling the time there, we got another hand. Katie, you have the floor. We're getting you unmuted. Let's see, can we? Carissa, can you unmute Katie?
I've given them
Here.
permission. I've given them permission to talk and sent a request
Okay,
to unmute.
gotcha. So Katie, it's on you. If you could just unmute yourself. Sometimes we don't know who's got the mute. Thank you, Carissa. So we still can't hear you, Katie. If you could just go down, there's a little microphone to the left and click that so it doesn't have a little red line through it.
And maybe worst case scenario, type your question into the chat if you are
Yeah.
having technical issues.
And maybe it was an accidental hand up because the hand's gone. Or maybe somebody already lowered it. Katie, I'm sorry about this if you're having technical issues. If you want to put it in the chat, we'll read it. Or if it was an accidental hand raise and we got all excited about it, then we'll let you go and not hold you to it.
Also, if you're on your phone, *6 will also unmute yourself.
Thank you, Carissa, for knowing those things. Okay, any other questions or comments? And Katie, if for some reason the technical gods are working against you tonight, you can again shoot that email if you have a question or to make a comment. Again, a few more minutes of awkward silence in case anybody has something else to say. All right, then I just personally like to say it's good to see people showing up for these sorts of things. It's important and to be active here in your community. So I commend you all. This is a collective challenge to all of us. So thanks for showing up and everybody take care. Sorry, Katie, if you had a question or comment that it didn't work out, but please use the email. And I wish you all a good night. Take care all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.